guys, Mosa here, and today I'm bringing you my Week 18 NFL Power Rankings. Now, without further ado, let's get started. Now, let's kick it off with the Tennessee Titans at 3-13. They just took an L from the Jacksonville Jaguars and will take on the Houston Texans. Now, when it comes down to it, I think the Titans, honestly, they need to work on their offense. I mean, Will Levis could be their future, but his future is up in limbo. I think that it could go either ways. I think either the Tennessee Titans keep him and develop him, or they draft a new quarterback and build a team around him. Now, honestly, I think that the first option would be honestly the cheapest, obviously, but it would also be the potential best decision for the Titans. Because if you can develop him into the quarterback you need him to be, and you fix your offense and defense, you've got a team to be reckoned with in the future. Now, moving on to the New Orleans Saints, who took an L from the Las Vegas Raiders, are currently 5-11 and will take on the Buccaneers. Now, when it comes down to the New Orleans Saints, obviously the season's been over for a while, but honestly, losing to the Raiders? Are you kidding me? That is insanely bad for the New Orleans Saints. And honestly, first of all, they need a new quarterback. There is no way Derek Carr is the future of the Saints. So I expect them to not only get a new head coach, obviously, but they need to get a new quarterback. They need to draft someone. If they got pick where they can pick either like someone like, I don't know, Carson Beck or Quinn Ewers, whoever they can, and develop him, that's the thing the Saints need to do. And I honestly think this draft or the next one is the draft they'll draft their future franchise quarterback. Now, moving on to the Chicago Bears at 4-12. They just took an L from my Seattle Seahawks and will take on the Green Bay Packers in Lambeau Field. Now, when it comes down to the Bears, honestly, it was a given they would lose to the Seahawks, but honestly, what a terrible game and what a terrible team. Honestly, I'm not putting the full blame on Caleb Williams. He is having a bad season, obviously, but it's just his rookie year. Let's see if he can develop in the next few years. Who knows? Maybe he'll become one of the great quarterbacks of the Chicago Bears one day. But what I'm going to say is that the Chicago Bears need to start building around Caleb Williams this offseason and make sure that not only do you got the weapons, the protection to help the franchise quarterback Caleb Williams, but the defense to help him out when it comes to too many points being let up by the other team. Now, moving on to the 4-12 Jacksonville Jaguars, who just took a win from the Tennessee Titans and will take on the Indianapolis Colts this upcoming Sunday while in Indianapolis. Now, when it comes down to it, I honestly believe that the Indianapolis Colts and the Jacksonville Jaguars are going to be two teams that honestly may be a team to be rivaled with in 2025 if they get all of their situation all sorted. If they make a good decision in the free agency and in the draft, I think that Jacksonville will have one of the best teams in the league, vice versa with the Indianapolis Colts. But when it comes to Jaguars, honestly, first of all, they're not going to get a quarterback, even if they had the opportunity to get Shedeur Sanders. They're most likely, if they got a top draft pick like that and a bunch of teams ahead of them are going to pick quarterbacks, I think that the main option for them is picking the Heisman Trophy winner, Travis Hunter, instead of a quarterback. And that will help their defense above all else. Now, moving on to the 4-12 Carolina Panthers, who just took an L from the Buccaneers and will take on the Falcons in Atlanta. Now, when it comes down to it, the Panthers, honestly, we're going to start with, obviously, the quarterback. Honestly, Bryce Young is a good quarterback, or a decent one at that, but he needed development, and later on in the year, he got that development. He started playing better than he's ever played before in the NFL. And honestly, I think he'll improve more and more with Dave Canales as the head coach. So I'm honestly going to say this. We're going to be seeing a lot more of Bryce Young being a top-level quarterback in the upcoming seasons, while the Carolina Panthers in the offseason start building a team that is healthy enough to help him push the Panthers into the playoffs. Now, moving on to the New England Patriots, who just took an L from the Chargers. They are 3-13 and will take on the Buffalo Bills at home. Now, when it comes to the New England Patriots, they will not be selecting a quarterback, obviously. I think they got their quarterback, and that being their current, well, going to be, obviously, he's not going to be the rookie quarterback of next year, but that's Drake May. He played pretty good throughout the games he's played, and honestly, I expect improvement from him. Honestly, we need to see improvements by Gerard Mayo during the offseason. And honestly, I think that this is going to be the year that the Patriots actually start not making it to the playoffs, but getting closer. I think that this was a down year, that next year they'll be probably 8-9, something like that, but still not making the playoffs, but getting closer and improving overall, both on offense and defense. Now, moving on to the Cleveland Browns at 3-13, they took an L from the Dolphins and will take on the Ravens in Baltimore. Now, obviously, Cleveland ain't playing for anything other than a top draft pick, so them winning this game is pointless. But it's not pointless for the Ravens, who are looking for a playoff spot as a division champions. Besides the point, the Browns are honestly the worst team when they're with a quarterback named Deshaun Watson. And obviously, they're still going to keep him unless they can do something that can void his contract. Then they'll release him. In the end, I think that they restructured his contract, so he's only owed $90-some million. Honestly, for what he's been accused of, it's still too high for me. But still, besides that, the Browns need to improve both offensive and defensively. The head coach, Kevin Stefanski, honestly, you need to do a little bit better. And honestly, if they still had Baker Mayfield, they'd probably be in the playoffs this year. We'd never know, to be honest. Hindsight is 2020, but still, the Browns, they need to work this offseason on getting better for the future endeavors. Now, moving on to the New York Jets at 4-12. They took an L from the rival Bills and will take on the Dolphins at home. Now, when it comes to the New York Jets, I honestly believe that the Jets are going to pick a quarterback either in this draft or the next. One of the two. Aaron Rodgers is not your future. Aaron Rodgers is the reason why you're suffering. Honestly, getting rid of your head coach. Worst decision ever defensively. Honestly, it's going to be a tough time for... Also, you had the potential Jerry Jeudy trade, but he has horrible Madden stats apparently. And that's why Woody Johnson decided against trading for him. And honestly, which would have been better than getting Devontae Adams, to be honest. But still, the point being that the New York Jets are just in a whirlpool of disasters, and it's all because of Aaron Rodgers. And honestly, they're going to have to cut their losses with Rodgers and have him prepare a quarterback for the future. Now, moving on to the San Francisco 49ers at 6-10. They took an L on Monday Night Football to the Detroit Lions and will take on the Arizona Cardinals. Now, when it comes down to it, I honestly believe that the San Francisco 49ers are going to suffer a little bit, especially due to Brock Purdy's injury. I believe he should not start Week 18. It is pointless for both teams, to be honest. So I suggest putting your backup quarterback in, having him play, and whether you win or lose doesn't matter. I just think that the 49ers should work on both their defense and their offensive line in order to give more protection and, when it comes to the defense, more defensive players for the San Francisco 49ers, because honestly, there are some defensive players on that team that are just not working out, Devondre Campbell being one. So I think that the 49ers should look at their defense and O-line this upcoming offseason. Now, moving on to the Dallas Cowboys at 7-9. They just took an L from the Philadelphia Eagles, who clinched the NFC East, and they'll be taking on the Washington Commanders, who also made the playoffs this upcoming Sunday at home. Now, when it comes to the Dallas Cowboys, they need to work on everything, from quarterback all the way down to the kicker. Honestly, I'm thinking that this team, like Dak Prescott, if he can stay healthy, he's the guy. But if he's not healthy, then you should draft a new quarterback. You should draft a new offensive line. You should sign running backs or whatever else you can do, both in free agency and in the draft, to upgrade the offense and defense. Because honestly, Dallas, unless Jerry Jones continues to do the same thing he's been doing, will never win a Super Bowl if they continue down the same path. Now, moving on to the Indianapolis Colts at 7-9, they took an L from the New York Giants, and they will be taking on the Jacksonville Jaguars at home. Now, when it comes to the Colts, they have been eliminated from playoff contention after the Giants beat them. Honestly, I saw them hardly as a playoff contender, especially since the Broncos just need a win. So, realistically, it was an uphill battle, even if they did beat New York. So, I'm honestly thinking that the Indianapolis Colts, first of all, quarterback. Honestly, develop Anthony Richardson or draft a new guy. Obviously, he's still young, so you can still develop him, like I said. But for right now, I'm thinking that there is an option for the Indianapolis Colts to move on from that quarterback and have, let's say, Joe Flacco remain on the team, veteran quarterback who will then teach the upcoming quarterback, and then boom, you got a new successor. And obviously, you need to upgrade that defense and give some new weapons to whoever is going to lead the team at quarterback in 2025 and ahead. Now, moving on to the New York Giants at 3-13, they took down the Colts and will take on the Eagles in Lincoln Financial Field. Now, when it comes to the New York Giants, honestly, they're going to pick Shedeur Sanders if they have that number 1 overall pick. Otherwise, if they don't have the number 1 overall pick and Shedeur goes to the Raiders, most likely, I believe that the New York Giants would most likely take the next best player available, that being Travis Hunter, and most likely put him at either corner or wide receiver. I'd say corner, but wide receiver to pair him up with Malik Nabers could be a good option. But they could also go up with offensive line to protect whoever it is their future quarterback will be, whether it be Drew Lock or anyone else like Tommy DeVito. But in the end, it's either going to be quarterback or offensive line or best player available, Travis Hunter. One of those will be the picks. And when it comes to the offseason, in free agency, make sure to pick up some defensive players so that your team doesn't get left behind. Now, moving on to the Arizona Cardinals at 7-9, they just took an L from the LA Rams and will take on the San Francisco 49ers at home. Now, when it comes down to the Cardinals, just like the 49ers, they should bench their quarterback, not because he's bad or anything, but to spare him. Put the backup in, let them play, let them have some fun. In the end, I think this is going to be a matchup for basically bragging rights on whose team actually ended up in dead last in the division, all that kind of stuff. So they're going to need both the Cardinals and the 49ers to work in the offseason. The offensive line is a bit crucial. I say defense for the Cardinals is a lot more crucial than ever. Maybe a few receiving targets in free agency. But in the end, when it comes down to it, honestly, I think the Cardinals will have to look to the draft when it comes to their offensive line problems, along with defensive line problems. Because I honestly think that you could probably get some decent offensive lines in the draft, and same goes for defensive line. Now, moving on to the Las Vegas Raiders at 4-12, they just took a W from the New Orleans Saints and will take on the LA Chargers at home. Now, obviously, the Raiders are ruining their tank by winning, obviously, and I did have them bumped up a whole lot, but that's just because of how bad other teams were. And honestly, they might be going down again when it comes to the LA Chargers. Yeah, but other than that, I think that the Los Angeles Chargers really need to work on first drafting your quarterback, whether it be Shador, Carson, whoever it is. It doesn't matter. Quinn Ewers as well. In the end, they're going to have to work for their quarterback. They're going to have to build an offensive line to protect that quarterback. And they're going to have to put receiving targets and running backs to help out on that offense, while also drafting and signing a few of those players on defense. Because honestly, both the offense and defense of the Raiders will need to be replaced or at least tuned by their new head coach, because I do not feel like Antonio Pierce will remain the Raiders head coach. Now moving on to the 8-8 Atlanta Falcons, who just took an L on Sunday Night Football to the Washington Commanders, while they'll be taking on the Carolina Panthers at home. Now when it comes to the Atlanta Falcons, honestly, pretty good for, obviously not going to be Rookie of the Year, obviously, for Michael Penix. But honestly, they need a little bit more than just a win over the Panthers, as they need the Buccaneers to lose in order to get into the playoffs. And honestly, I think that that's honestly not probably going to happen. I think the Buccaneers might actually win their game and end up entering the playoffs over the Atlanta Falcons. So honestly, the Falcons are a pretty good team that honestly, at the beginning of the year, you would have thought, oh, okay, this team is definitely winning the division, but then, oh, looks like they've been torn down from the inside out. But honestly, just a little bit of retooling in the offseason and they'll be good. Now on to my Seattle Seahawks at 9-7, who just took down the Bears and will take on the NFC West champion Los Angeles Rams in Los Angeles. Now when it comes down to it, obviously we've lost the division and we've lost our playoff spot. We no longer have an opportunity to get into the playoffs, but we do got an opportunity to beat the Rams. So I'll be there to watch that game from, well, obviously from home. I'm not going to Los Angeles to watch that game, but still, this is going to be a very fun game for the Seahawks, and they're just going to have to prepare for the future. This is a very good season under Mike McDonald, and I honestly expect more great seasons from him. And Geno Smith, probably not going to be our quarterback in 2026. I think 2025, he might still be there. But by 2026, I think that the Seahawks will definitely have a new quarterback, a young quarterback, who will take over and become the official franchise quarterback. Now, moving on to the Miami Dolphins at 8-8. They just took a win from the Cleveland Browns and will take on the New York Jets in MetLife Stadium. Now, when it comes down to it, honestly, the Dolphins have had a pretty good year. They still have a chance to make it into the playoffs, but one of those things that needs to happen is that they need to, honestly, they need to beat, well, not beat, well, they need to beat the Jets. That's one thing. But they need the Broncos to lose. If that doesn't happen, the Broncos win, or I think even or tie, they actually clinch the playoff spot. So the best case scenario for the Dolphins, Broncos lose, they win, they're in the playoffs. But to be honest, that might not happen. We might not be seeing Miami in the playoffs this year. But it honestly will be a good, not a good, for Dolphins fans, a good thing. But honestly, it would be a fun way to see the Dolphins back into the playoffs and see if they can actually win a game in the playoffs with Tua. Now, moving on to the 9-7 Denver Broncos, who took an L from the Cincinnati Bengals and will be taking the defending Super Bowl champions on at home. Now, when it comes down to it, the Broncos need to beat the Chiefs. That's all they need. Either that, or if they lose or tie. They tie, they can also make it. But if they lose, they need every single other team with an 8-win record to lose. And that is going to be kind of hard. So the Broncos need to work as hard as they can. The Chiefs are probably going to play their backup since they already got the 1 seed. So I'm thinking that the Broncos will most likely, possibly, win this game, but it all comes down to how they perform against the backups of the Kansas City Chiefs. Now moving on to the 8-8 Cincinnati Bengals, who just took a win from the Denver Broncos and will take on the Pittsburgh Steelers on Saturday Night Football. Now when it comes down to the Steelers and the Bengals, I'm honestly saying this. The Bengals might actually win, but if they don't, then they're out. That is their uh, possibility. Because if they win, let's say the Broncos lose, they will make the playoffs, even if the Dolphins win. Because I think the the Broncos definitely lost the Bengals, so that gives them the advantage, and they might. Well, honestly, I'm not really that uh when it's smart when it comes to the seedings in the playoffs. I know how most of it works, but in my opinion, I think that the Bengals will be the ones to make it if the Broncos lose and they win. But all comes down to who wins and who loses because honestly, the Bengals went from being trash to now 8-8 and one win away from the playoffs. So honestly, and the Steelers are going to come hard as well because they're looking for that division title and they need to win that game and hope that Baltimore loses to Cleveland. So in the end, it's all really going to come down to who can really top it out in week 18. Now moving on to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at 9-7. They just took a win from the Carolina Panthers and will take on the New Orleans Saints at home. Now when it comes to the New Orleans Saints, obviously they most likely will lose this game. And if the Buccaneers do win, then that will give them the division title. A loss and a Falcons win will give the win of the division to the Falcons. Now, this is a tough matchup, and not because the Saints are this tough team, but because it might actually be a trap game and might screw over the Buccaneers. Honestly, this is a game to watch out for because honestly, the Buccaneers are just one win away from a division title. And honestly, I think it's going to happen, but you never know. It might actually turn out to be the complete opposite, and the Buccaneers lose to the New Orleans Saints. Now, moving on to the Houston Texans, who honestly are 9-7. They took an L from the Ravens and will take on the Titans in Nashville. Now, when it comes to the Houston Texans, I'm honestly going to say this. The Houston Texans not only will be the 4 seed, they will have no chance to become the 3 seed. Even if they win, they're not going to be no 3 seed. I think that it will be either Baltimore or Pittsburgh, then Buffalo, and obviously Kansas City number 1. But still, this is a game that is going to be hard fought by both teams, mostly due to pride. But yeah, the Houston Texans are ready for the playoffs, although when it comes down to it, are they going to win a single playoff game? And that is a big question that goes unanswered. Now, moving on to the Los Angeles Rams at 10-6, the NFC West champions, as they beat the Arizona Cardinals and will take on my Seattle Seahawks in a meaningless game. This is mostly for pride, basically. So yeah, tiebreaker, Seattle lost it, and even if they win, they won't make the playoffs. The Rams have beaten them, and the Commanders took the final spot. So realistically, I'm going to tell you this honestly, the Rams are honestly not going to make it far past the wild card. I think that even though they managed to make it, I don't think they're good enough to make it back to the Super Bowl, let alone the divisional round. So I'm going to say this, the LA Rams are not going to be anywhere close to the Super Bowl as they will be one and done in the playoffs. Now let's kick off the top 10 with the Pittsburgh Steelers. At 10-6, they just took an L from the Chiefs on Christmas and will take on the Cincinnati Bengals on Saturday Night Football. Now when it comes to the Bengals and Steelers, honestly the Steelers are battling for that playoff spot, or better yet, not spot, but division title, while the Bengals are fighting for a playoff spot. In the end, I think that this is going to be a tough matchup for both teams. The Pittsburgh Steelers obviously have the advantage being at home and honestly having the better team. So honestly, I'm thinking that the Steelers will win and they will be the potential AFC North champions. Now moving on to the LA Chargers, 10-6. They just obliterated the Patriots and will take on the Raiders in Las Vegas. Now when it comes to the Chargers, they just clinched the playoffs after their win over the Patriots. I'm going to be honest, this is going to be a very tough playoff run for the Chargers. Although you might win 2 or maybe one game in the playoffs, divisional round and wild card, but still, in the end, this is a tough team that you're going to have to watch out for in the playoffs. The other ones most likely being the Ravens or Steelers, whoever is the one that makes it, and the Broncos as well if they make it. So in the end, it all comes down to how the Chargers will perform in the wild card, and especially with those tougher teams, which I believe they might have to face a tough team, maybe Pittsburgh or Baltimore, while potentially even taking on obviously the Texans are the weakest team, but even that weak team can really give the Chargers a run for their money. Now, moving on to the Washington Commanders, 11-5. They've just beat the Falcons and will take on the Cowboys in Dallas. So, honestly, they're in the playoffs. They have nothing more to fight for. So, probably play the backups in this game. Make sure that you're ready for a playoff game. Do not do the RG3 and have Jaden Daniels play in a meaningless game where he potentially gets injured and then injures himself in the playoffs like RG3. There's a lot of similarities between him and RG3. And honestly, I'm not liking that. I'm honestly not rooting against Jaden Daniels. He's a very good quarterback, and I expect him to do even better. But still, it's going to be tough if he actually gets the same career path as RG3, because he was a guy who had expectations. And honestly, I have the same expectations, probably even more for Jaden Daniels. So, game against the Cowboys, bench him along with all the other starters, put the backups in, make sure that if win or loss doesn't matter, just make it to the play. You're already in the playoffs, so just get out of that game and prepare for your wild card playoff game. Now, moving on to the Green Bay Packers. They have just lost to the Minnesota Vikings. They are 11-5 and will take on the Chicago Bears. An easy game they should win. So, they've made the playoffs. They have no route to win the division. So, just bench everyone and beat the Bears. Honestly, I don't think even the backups will lose to the Bears. This team is honestly red hot, and I think that they might actually make a good run. Although, they will not make it to the Super Bowl. I do not believe that. I believe that the Packers will indeed do some good, but in the end, it's still not going to be good enough, and the Packers will 100% be defeated in the playoffs, whether it be the divisional or NFC championship game, whichever one of the two it is, but they will not make it to the Super Bowl, but will have a very fun run towards the NFC championship. Now, moving on to the 11-5 Baltimore Ravens, who just took a win from the Houston Texans and will take on the Cleveland Browns. Now, when it comes to the Ravens, win and they win the division. That's all they need. The Pittsburgh Steelers need them to lose and for themselves to win over the Bengals to win the division. Obviously, this is going to be a very tough matchup for both the Steelers and the Ravens, even though they're facing honestly weak division teams. They're going to have a tough time. Baltimore, not as much as the Steelers, but honestly, it's going to be very tough, and the Baltimore Ravens might actually lose this game to the Cleveland Browns as a trap game. And honestly, the Ravens have a tough route to make it to the AFC Championship, and honestly, they might also not be the ones to make it to the Super Bowl either. Now, kicking off the top 5, we got the Philadelphia Eagles, 13-3, took a win over the Dallas Cowboys and will take on the New York Giants at home. Now, when it comes to the division champions, they beat the Cowboys, they won the division. The only way they could have lost it is if the Commanders won the rest of their games, and the other thing happened for the Eagles, and that would be to lose against the Cowboys and the Giants. Obviously, they did not lose to the Cowboys, so that gave them the automatic division win. So, I'm gonna be honest, the Eagles, they're a tough contender. They might actually make the Super Bowl, and maybe they'll have a Super Bowl rematch with the Chiefs. You never know. In the end, I think this is a tough team that teams are going to be facing off in the NFC Championship game, and it's probably going to be Philly and Detroit in Detroit, because honestly, I think that the Detroit Lions are a tough team that might actually win the division. But in the end, it all really comes down to who has the better luck. Because honestly, in this league, luck is mostly what wins games. Now at number 4, we got the Minnesota Vikings, who are 14-2. They just took a win from the Green Bay Packers and will take on the Detroit Lions on Sunday Night Football. Now, when it comes down to it, this will be the last game of the NFL's regular season. It'll be for the NFC North Championship. So whoever wins will advance as the number 1 seed and as the division champions of the NFC North. It is basically in between the two of them. The Eagles have no say in this. They have no way in. So for the number 1 seed, that's what I mean. But still, these two teams are going to tough it out. And honestly, it's going to be a bloodbath for both teams, because both teams are going to try and win over the other. And honestly, this is just going to be the potential best game of the NFL regular season. And honestly, maybe even throughout the playoffs. Now at number 3, we got the 15-1 AFC West champions and defending 2-time Super Bowl champion Kansas City Chiefs, who just took down the Steelers on Christmas and will take on the Denver Broncos in Mile High. Now, when it comes down to it, honestly, I think that the Kansas City Chiefs are this low mostly due to the fact that they should not be 15-1. Honestly, like I said, a lot of their games have been due to honest luck. They have been lucking it out, and honestly, I think that this is going to be a very tough road to the playoffs, because how many 15-1 teams have you seen in the modern era honestly not only make the Super Bowl, but win it outright? Yeah, not that many. So I'm thinking that the Chiefs will be doing the same thing, and we will not have a three-peat in NFL Super Bowl history. But hey, you never know. In the end, it really all comes down to how the Chiefs will perform in the first round of the playoffs for them, which would be the divisional round. But this is going to be just a game where they rest their starters and they just move on to the playoffs outright. Now at number 2, we got the Buffalo Bills, 13-3. They just took a win over the Jets and will take on the Patriots in Foxborough. Now, when it comes down to it, the Bills already made the playoffs as division champions. They most likely will be the number 2 seed, so they'll most likely also rest their starters against the Patriots, and yeah, they'll have a fun time. They might even make the AFC Championship against the Chiefs and maybe get some payback. So in the end, this team has a tough road to the playoffs, through the playoffs actually. But in the end, it really all comes down to, can the Bills not only make the Super Bowl, but avenge their 4-time Super Bowl appearances and all of them being losses? Will they be able to not only make it, but win their very first Super Bowl in franchise history? Now, moving on to the number 1 team at 14-2. They took a win on Monday Night Football to the San Francisco 49ers. We have the Detroit Lions, who are taking on the Minnesota Vikings on Sunday Night Football in the final game of the regular season. Like I said, it's going to be one of the best games in the regular season and potentially even in the postseason. Now, honestly, like I said before, the winner makes it as the division champion and number 1 seed. This is going to be a tough, hard-fought game. The Jared Goff-led Lions versus the Sam Darnold-led Vikings. Honestly, 2 quarterbacks that we never thought would be battling for a number 1 seed. But still, things happen. In the end, I think that this team is going to have a tough time, but still, they're going to actually make it past into the divisional round as the number 1 seed, while the Vikings will be offered the 5 seed, and will be taking on Most likely the Philadelphia Eagles in the very first round in the wild card. Now that was it for this video. Tell me what you guys think in the comments below. Who do you think should be higher and who do you think should be lower? Comment down in the comments below. Now, like this video if you liked it, subscribe and hit the notification if you want more videos, and I'll see you guys next time.